Alexander Hale had forgotten what silence sounded like. For a decade, his life had been a carousel of boardrooms, analytics, negotiations, interviews, and the immutable hum of Manhattan finance drilling into his bones. 40 years old. A self-made investment mogul with a net worth the magazines loved to inflate. And yet, when he stepped into the grand marble lobby of the Manhattan Plaza Hotel, he felt hollow, scraped thin, like every decision he had made in the last 10 years had carved something essential out of him. His assistant had begged him to take a sabbatical. 3 weeks. She'd insisted. Just 3. He'd reluctantly agreed. Not because he believed rest would help, but because the numbness scared him more than exhaustion. The concierge handed him the welcome envelope. Some curated nonsense about spa credits and rooftop access. He barely registered it. What he did register sharply, vividly, was a voice. A woman's voice. Firm, urgent, trembling in a way that wasn't weakness, but strain stretched to its limits. Yes, yes. I said I need a new nanny today. Not next week. Not tomorrow. Today. The last one quit 20 minutes ago. The 20th in 6 months. Her words snapped like exposed wires. Alexander's head turned before he consciously meant to. She stood near a cluster of suitcases, one hand clutching her phone, the other pressed to her brow as if she were physically holding herself together. She was breathtaking, though not in the ornamental, polished way he often saw in charity galas. Naomi Carter was beautiful in a fierce, startlingly real way. 34. With skin the warm, rich tone of mahogany silk, cheekbones sharp with determination, lips pressed together in a soldier's line, and eyes. God. Her eyes. They were dark, luminous, full of a strength born from too much responsibility and not enough help. A woman who carried entire worlds on her back. And right now, that world was collapsing. I work 12-hour shifts, she continued into the phone, voice cracking. I can't do that and raise a toddler alone. I need someone reliable. Please. The word please wasn't weak, just exhausted. Sincere. Alexander felt something tighten in his chest, something ancient and immediate. Attraction. Yes, but not the shallow, fleeting kind he'd felt with women who saw him as headlines and assets. This felt like recognition, like some invisible thread had snapped taut between them. Their eyes met when she finally turned. Just for a second, long enough for him to see the storm behind her composure, long enough for her to register the tall, impeccably tailored stranger staring at her with disarming intensity. She blinked, not in flirtation, but in surprise, as if she'd forgotten there were other humans in the room. Then she looked away, muttering something to the receptionist about room cards and late checkouts. His pulse didn't slow. He couldn't make it slow. He had no business watching her like that. No business letting his imagination wander to who she was outside this lobby. No business wanting, needing to know her. Yet the sensation hit him with rare, almost violent clarity. I want to know her name, her story, her life. The man who prided himself on logic and control suddenly felt 16. Mr. Hale. The concierge asked, You're sweet. But Alexander's focus was fixed where Naomi had been standing, now empty. She was already speaking to the front desk, already finishing her call, already leaving. The pull inside him intensified. It wasn't lust. It wasn't curiosity. It was something far more dangerous instinct. He moved toward the desk. "Excuse me," he said quietly to the receptionist. "The woman you were just assisting, do you know what agency she uses for childcare?" The receptionist blinked, startled. Yes, sir. Miss Carter works with Sunlight Domestic Services. They said they were sending a replacement nanny, but they're not," Alexander said, the plan forming before he even recognized it as a plan. His heart beat hard, like it remembered a purpose his mind had forgotten. Not anymore. The receptionist gave him a confused, almost alarmed look. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered, except the sudden, inexplicable certainty that he needed to be near Naomi Carter. Needed to understand why her voice had pierced straight through the numbness he'd been living in. Needed to help her, though he had no idea why helping her mattered so much. He only knew that her fatigue, her quiet desperation, the way her shoulders shook when she thought no one was watching it, made something in him ache, made something buried awaken. Before he could second-guess himself, he turned away from the desk and walked toward the bank of elevators where Naomi stood waiting. Her arms crossed tightly, her breathing unsteady from the tail end of frustration. He shouldn't approach her. He knew that. He was a stranger, a wealthy one, at that, which made the situation even more irrational. But when the elevator dinged open and she stepped inside, he stepped in too. The doors slid shut, sealing them into a small, golden-lit space humming with tension. She didn't look at him, not until he said, gently, "Long day." Naomi exhaled a humorless laugh. "Long life." Her voice was low, frayed at the edges. "Sorry. I don't normally vent in public, but today's been a nightmare." "You don't need to apologize," he said softly. She finally turned to face him fully, and the force of her gaze nearly knocked the air from his lungs. Up close, she was even more beautiful, eyes deep and expressive, lashes damp from stress, a tiny scar near her left eyebrow, hinting at stories she would never tell a stranger. "You have a child," he said before realizing how that sounded. "I mean, you mentioned a toddler." "Yeah," she sighed. "My son, Liam. He's 2, and he's everything. But I'm alone and exhausted, and apparently incapable of keeping a nanny employed for more than 3 days. Why do they quit?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Because Liam is spirited, curious, clingy, wonderful, a lot. And because I'm not home enough. I work at Bell and Rowan Financial, senior analyst, which is code for I belong to the office." Alexander felt a pang of something almost like guilt. He knew the culture of that world, the suffocating grind, the way it consumed people and spit them out. "You deserve help," he said quietly. "You deserve rest." She gave him a small, tired smile. "That's sweet. But right now I'd settle for someone who won't quit." The elevator chimed. Her floor. As she stepped out, she offered him a polite nod, the kind you give someone you appreciate but expect never to see again. "Have a good stay, Mr. Alexander," he said. "Just Alexander." "Naomi," she replied, though he already knew. "Good night." She turned and walked down the corridor, the dim lights tracing the elegant curve of her spine. He stayed in the elevator, watching until she disappeared behind her door. 3 seconds. 5. 10. And then the turning point hit him like a blow. He could see her again. He could be close to her. He could step into her world without breaking the unspoken boundaries between strangers. If he didn't approach her as a millionaire investor, if he approached her as something else, someone else. An idea struck him, half irrational impulse, half desperate instinct, and before he could talk himself out of it, he pressed the button for the lobby again. Back at the front desk, he leaned in, calm and focused in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Call Sunlight Domestic Services, see," he said. "Tell them the replacement they promised is no longer necessary." "And why is that?" Mr. Hale Alexander allowed a slow, determined smile to form one that felt dangerously close to the man he used to be before the numbness set in. "Because I'll be taking the assignment." The receptionist blinked. "You, sir, with all due respect, you're not a nanny." "No," he murmured, "but I'm very good at figuring things out." And in his chest, where emptiness had lived for too long, something warm flickered to life, a spark, a hunger, a reckless hope. Naomi Carter didn't know it yet, but she had just changed the course of his entire life, and Alexander Hale had no intention of walking away. Not now, not ever. Alexander moved through the hotel corridors as if sleepwalking, but his pulse was awake, too awake, sharp, electric. The decision he'd made in the elevator still vibrated through him, reckless yet strangely inevitable, like an instinct older than reason. He stepped into his suite, closed the door behind him, and immediately took out his phone. No hesitation. No weighing pros and cons. He called Sunlight Domestic Services. "This is Alex Harris," he said, his voice pitched lower, smoother, the tone of a man used to disguising himself in negotiations. "I heard you need someone to fill an emergency childcare position." The receptionist sounded relieved. "Yes, a client. Naomi Carter, her nanny, quit this morning. If you're available, I am." He cut in, immediately, as she listed responsibilities, payment, hours. He barely listened. All he heard was Naomi's voice from the lobby, echoing in his mind, strained, breaking, brave. All he saw was her eyes. He wasn't doing this to meddle. It felt nothing like the games wealthy men played to chase women. This was something else, something frighteningly sincere. He felt drawn to her the way a compass finds north. When the call ended, he stood in silence, absorbing the reality of what he had just done. Alexander Hale, who once refused to do his own laundry in college, had just volunteered to be someone's nanny. More accurately, her nanny. A laugh escaped him, quiet and disbelieving. "What the hell are you doing, Hale?" But he already knew. He was doing exactly what he'd spent his life avoiding, following a feeling instead of a calculation. His reflection caught his eye in the window, a tall man in a tailored coat, expensive watch glinting. A man shaped by ambition, not intimacy. A man who had built an empire, but had no idea how to build a life. "She won't recognize you," he murmured to himself. Though uncertainty brushed the edges of his confidence, Naomi had seen him once. Would she connect Alex Harris, temporary domestic staff, with Alexander Hale, one of the city's most recognizable financial powerhouses? Possibly. But he found he didn't care. For the first time in years, the risk made him feel alive. He called the hotel manager next. The man answered on the first ring, his tone deferential. "Mr. Hale, how can I help you?" "I need access to staff uniforms," Alexander said calmly, "and any onboarding documents required for temporary hotel workers." A pause. Then, "Of course, sir." Money was a skeleton key in New York, and Alexander had long mastered when to use it. Within an hour, a discreet black garment bag arrived outside his suite. Inside was the uniform crisp white shirt, black slacks, a navy blue apron, and a name tag that read, Alex H. He stared at it longer than he meant to. Something about it was humbling, almost grounding. He had spent his life wearing suits that cost more than some people's rent. This uniform stripped him down, equalized him, made him invisible in a way he had never been. Strangely, it felt right. But beneath the strange exhilaration simmered a deeper conflict, a whisper of doubt threading through his ribs. What if you're intruding? What if she hates the lie? What if stepping into her life uninvited, under false identity, wasn't fate, but arrogance? His jaw tightened. Alexander prided himself on integrity. Deception wasn't his style. But something about Naomi's loneliness, her fatigue, the way she held herself as if constantly bracing for the next blow, it unsettled him. It awakened a need in him to step between her and the world that demanded too much from her. And more than that, he wanted to understand her, not from a distance, not as a stranger. He wanted to earn her trust, not buy it. But how could he do that as himself, Alexander Hale, attracted attention? Expectation. Performance. Alex Harris. However, could slip quietly into her orbit, could learn the cadence of her life, could see who she truly was when she wasn't wearing armor. The thought made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt since his 20s, a feeling both terrifying and hopeful. As he changed into the uniform, he noticed another shift inside himself, a small, startling question. Why her? He had seen countless beautiful women, intelligent women, impressive women. None had pulled him in like this. He knew almost nothing about Naomi, her work, her exhaustion, her son. But there was something unmistakable about her presence. A woman who fought through life without expecting anyone to catch her when she fell. A woman who had learned to carry everything alone. A woman who needed help but didn't know how to ask for it. Something inside him whispered, "You know that loneliness. You've lived it, too." Maybe that was the truth at the center of this madness. Maybe seeing her had felt like seeing himself, reflected only braver, stronger, still fighting. He buttoned the shirt, fastened the apron. He looked nothing like Alexander Hale now, more like a younger, softer version of himself. Before the fortune, before the numbness. Alex Harris wasn't a performance. He was simply the man underneath. He grabbed the packet of documents the hotel had provided: employee protocols, emergency contacts, a temporary badge granting staff access. Everything he needed to walk into Naomi Carter's suite as though he belonged there. But before leaving, he paused by the door, his hand on the handle, that whisper of doubt rising once more. What if you ruin this? What if she finds out? What if she never forgives you? He exhaled slowly. I don't want to deceive her. he admitted aloud, the empty room absorbing the confession. I just need time. Time to show her he wasn't a threat. Time to show her he cared not about her looks or the spark between them, but about the weight she carried. Time to become someone she might let in. Just a few days, he whispered, echoing the vow in his mind. Just enough for her to see me, to see the man he could be with her, the one he wanted to become. He stepped into the hallway, locked the door behind him, and walked toward the elevator with steady, resolute steps. But just before the elevator opened, he felt another shift, a quiet, unexpected twist of fate. Down the corridor, Naomi was standing outside her suite, struggling with a stack of paperwork and a toddler clinging to her leg. Both frustration and exhaustion etched across her face. She didn't see him. Not yet, but he saw her. And in that single heartbeat, every plan he had made collided with a new, startling truth. Helping her wasn't the hard part. Hiding himself from her would be. The car from Sunlight Domestic Services dropped Alexander in front of a narrow Brooklyn townhouse lined with ivy and the soft glow of warm porch lights. It was humbler than he expected. Quiet street, aging brick, a small balcony with a hanging plant someone clearly forgot to water. But it felt lived in, protective, like the last standing fortress of a woman who'd been fighting on every front. He tightened the apron around his waist, adjusted the Alex H badge, and forced himself to breathe. Every step up the porch felt unreal. The kind of moment where life pivoted on something as simple as a knock. He lifted his hand and tapped twice. The door swung open faster than he anticipated. Naomi stood there with her phone pressed between her shoulder and ear, her free hand clutching a stack of reports. She looked frazzled, gorgeous in that unguarded way that made Alexander's chest constrict. Yes, she snapped into the phone. I hope this one lasts more than 24 hours, or I'm... Her sentence died. Her eyes lifted. She froze in the doorway. She saw a tall man in a clean navy apron, white shirt rolled at the sleeves, broad shoulders filling the frame like no domestic staff ever had. Her gaze traveled instinctively over him, sharp jaw, warm eyes, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, and suspicion instantly narrowed her stare. Alexander dipped his head in polite greeting. Hello, he said softly. I'm Alex. The company sent me. Naomi blinked, visibly replaying that in her mind, as if it didn't align with what she was seeing. You're sure you're the help? He swallowed laughter, managing only a mild nod. Yes, Ms. Carter. I'm here to assist. Her skepticism was almost tangible, but stress was winning over doubt, and exhaustion pulled at the corners of her face. She stepped aside, letting frustration and necessity push her forward. Fine, come in. If you can last more than 2 hours with my daughter, I'll call it a miracle. Alexander stopped mid-step, confusion flickering. Your daughter. Naomi turned sharply. Yes, Mia. 7 years old. Haven't they briefed you? He forced his expression not to crack. Not exactly. Her phone vibrated in her hand. She glanced at the screen and groaned. Of course. Fantastic timing. It was her office. Something urgent. Something impossible to refuse. She pressed the phone to her ear, pacing halfway into the living room. What do you mean the client moved the meeting to 5? No. I can't well. I have to, God. Fine. I'll be there. When she hung up, her shoulders slumped. She looked at Alexander, apologetic but rushed. I don't have time to explain anything. I need to leave now. Mia's in the living room. She's energetic. That was the diplomatic version, clearly. When she moved to grab her jacket, she paused, eyes flicking to him once more. Something in her expression softened, maybe desperation, maybe hope, maybe the quiet prayer that this stranger wouldn't walk out like the 20 others. Can you handle her? She asked quietly. Alexander met her gaze with something warm, something steady. I'll try my best. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Thank you. I'll be back as soon as I can. She slipped out the door, leaving Alexander standing in her foyer with the weight of 2 identities on his shoulders, the man she needed, and the man he was hiding. He took a long breath, bracing himself, because behind the next door was the girl who had broken 20 adults in half, and he was about to meet her. The living room looked like a tiny war zone disguised as a child's playroom, markers uncapped, stuffed animals lying like fallen soldiers, a trail of glitter glinting beneath the ceiling light, as if a tiny fairy had been violently kidnapped mid-craft session. And in the middle of it stood Mia Carter, 7 years old, curly hair exploding in every direction, chin lifted with the fierce confidence of a girl who knew she had single-handedly destroyed more than 20 adult caretakers. The moment she spotted Alexander in her doorway, broad-shouldered, too handsome, wearing a uniform that didn't match his face at all, her eyes widened like she'd just discovered prey that might bite back. Then she shouted, gleeful and wicked, "You hired another one for me to torture." Her voice ricocheted off the walls. Alexander blinked at her audacity before a laugh escaped him, warm and genuine. It surprised even him. Naomi, who had paused only a heartbeat before rushing out the door earlier, flushed bright red. "Mia," she warned under her breath. But the child was already gone, darting in circles around the coffee table like a comet with no orbit, tossing pillows, cackling, determined to test this new intruder. Alexander watched her whirlwind with the quiet interest of someone observing a rare animal. No fear, no irritation, just intrigue. In his chest, something unexpected tugged something he hadn't felt in years. Not pity, not annoyance, something closer to recognition. She's like me, he thought, unruly, uncontained, too smart for her own good, afraid that letting people stay meant giving them pieces of herself. And so she chased them away first. Mia zipped past him again, darting into the kitchen. Alexander followed at an easy pace, keeping his presence steady, unthreatening. He understood instinctively that raising your voice only added oxygen to her fire. He found her standing on a kitchen chair, like a tiny general preparing for war. She jabbed a finger at a plate of salmon. "I hate this. I want pizza. Pizza. Every night. Forever." Her voice cracked with dramatic betrayal. Alexander leaned one shoulder against the doorway. "Every night," she declared, arms crossed. "And you can't make me eat fish, or broccoli, or anything weird." "Is salmon weird?" he asked lightly. "It's disgusting. It smells like the ocean farted." Alexander bit the inside of his cheek to hide the laugh. That's quite a description. I'm a creative genius, she announced. And I'm not eating that. He walked closer, lowering himself so they were eye level. His knees bent with an ease that surprised him. He hadn't knelt like this for anyone in years. Okay, he said calmly. How about a deal? Mia eyed him with suspicion. A trick. A challenge. She perked up immediately. Competition was her language. What challenge? Alexander tapped his finger against a wooden spoon on the counter, then lifted it with a solemnity that made her squint. This. A spoon, she said flatly. Are you gonna whack me? No violence today. He chuckled. This is for a game. She leaned forward. Go on. Straight face challenge. If you win, you get pizza for dinner. If I win, you take one heroic bite of salmon. She gasped. One whole bite. One. And you won't cheat. I don't need to cheat. Mia. She narrowed her eyes at him, assessing him like a poker opponent. Then she climbed down from the chair, planting her feet firmly on the ground. Fine. Hit me with your best shot. Alexander tapped the wooden spoon 3 times against the counter. A cue, a declaration of battle. He settled into stillness, face relaxed, eyes warm. Mia pressed her lips together, puffed her cheeks, and tried. She really tried not to smile. 1 second. 2. 3. And then she cracked like a dam. Her giggles burst out uncontrollably, high-pitched and infectious, her body folding in 2 as she covered her mouth and wheezed. That's not fair. You made a weird face, I didn't. He protested lightly. That was just my face existing. She laughed harder, stumbling against him, tiny hand grabbing his sleeve for balance. The contact was small, barely anything, but Alexander felt it in his chest like a soft landmine. A child trusting him, a child reaching for him. And the warmth that swept through him was so unfamiliar, so disarming. He had to steady himself. Okay, fine, she said between exhausted breaths. You win. I'll eat the evil salmon. But I want pizza tomorrow. Negotiator, he murmured. Like your mother, Mom negotiates with grown-ups, Mia said proudly. I negotiate life. He smiled. God, she was extraordinary, chaotic, brilliant, a miniature hurricane with dimples. Let's try dinner, he said gently. 1 step at a time. 1 very small bite, she emphasized, holding up her fingers an inch apart. The smallest. She nodded approvingly. You're not bad for a grown man. Oh, high praise. Don't make it weird, she muttered, hopping back onto the chair. He served her plate. She scrunched her face, but didn't protest. That alone felt monumental. And just as she braced for the first bite, the front door opened. Naomi entered, breathless and wary, preparing for disaster yelling. Food on the walls. 1 adult crying. 1 child triumphant. What she found instead was silent shock. Mia sat at the table calmly, fork raised like a civilized human. Alexander stood nearby, patient, gentle, offering encouragement with nothing more than a nod. Naomi froze mid-step, the grocery bag dangling from her hand. What is happening? She whispered. Mia pointed her fork at Alexander dramatically. He sorcered me. I did no such thing, Alexander said with a soft laugh. She lost a bet. You tricked me. You volunteered. Naomi approached slowly, as if any sudden movement would break the enchantment. She's eating. Attempting. Alexander corrected. Mia glared but took the bite anyway, scrunching her face like a cartoon villain defeated by vegetables. Naomi pressed a hand to her chest. I've never seen her agree to try anything. Alexander shrugged, trying to downplay the miracle. She just needed someone to play with her rules. But Naomi wasn't fooled. She saw more than he meant to reveal his patience, his calm, his warmth. Something in her expression softened in a way that made Alexander's stomach twist. Gratitude, yes, but also curiosity, a spark of belief, of trust. How did you do that? She asked softly. Alexander couldn't answer honestly, not without unraveling the lie he had wrapped himself in. So he gave her the safest truth he could manage. Mia's not difficult, he said quietly. She's just spirited and bored. Smart kids don't like being underestimated. Naomi stared at him, her breath catching, the exhaustion in her eyes suddenly melting into something gentler, something dangerously close to admiration. You talk like someone who's done this before, she whispered. He hadn't, not once. But he held her gaze, his heart thudding. I just pay attention. The room felt strangely intimate quiet, warm, almost suspended in time. Mia chewed reluctantly, grumbling dramatic protests. Naomi watched Alexander with an intensity that made him uneasy, not because it was unwelcome, but because he didn't deserve it. Not under a borrowed name, not wrapped in a lie that grew heavier each minute he remained in her home. And yet, when Mia finally swallowed her bite and Alexander offered an exaggerated cheer, Naomi's lips curved slowly into something he had not seen before. A real smile, soft, disbelieving, beautiful. You tamed her, she whispered. In 5 minutes. Not tamed, he said, voice low, just connected. Naomi looked at him like he was something impossible, something rare, something she didn't dare hope for. And Alexander, for the first time, felt the weight of his secret, not as guilt, but as fear. Because now that he'd seen the way she looked at him, he was terrified of the moment she discovered who he truly was. From the very first afternoon, Naomi Carter sensed something off about her new nanny. Not wrong exactly, just suspiciously extraordinary. It began with the way he carried himself. Most caretakers she'd hired walked in with timid smiles, hunched shoulders, and the weary aura of people already defeated by her daughter's reputation. But Alex, this tall, composed man, with warm eyes and quiet confidence, moved through her home like he belonged in places far grander than a modest Brooklyn townhouse. His steps were steady, shoulders relaxed, gait balanced and sure. Not arrogant, controlled. Like someone who had never once been intimidated by chaos, or children, or life, and definitely not by her job title. Naomi watched from the hallway as he surveyed the living room Mia had turned into a colorful disaster zone. Instead of panicking like the others, Alex simply rolled his sleeves, lifted a cushion, and began reorganizing with calm, measured precision. 10 minutes later, Naomi found herself staring, slack-jawed, as he straightened the sofa pillows with the symmetry of someone trained in luxury hospitality. The coffee table gleamed like polished glass. She could see her shocked face reflected in it. Every toy Mia had launched to the floor earlier formed neat rows, sorted by size and color, so precisely it looked like an interior design photo shoot. She blurted without thinking, "Have you worked in hotels?" Alex glanced up with an easy smile, the kind of smile that felt like a soft brushstroke across her nerves. "A few places," he murmured, "with slightly higher standards than average." Naomi didn't know that the higher standards he referred to were the 5-star properties he himself owned, but something in the way he said it sent a ripple of curiosity through her. Something about him simply did not match the label nanny, or housekeeper, or anything ending in assistant. And the longer he stayed in her house, the more the facade cracked. It happened next in the kitchen. Naomi was in the middle of a tense Zoom call, reporting quarterly projections to a team of people who had never once cared if she'd slept or eaten or had a migraine building behind her eyes. But as she spoke, a faint scent drifted into her room, citrusy, savory, buttery, warm. Her stomach fluttered before she even realized she'd stood up, half leaning out of the doorway. Alex stood at the stove, aproned and focused, one hand holding a pan, the other squeezing a lemon with expert one-handed finesse. He tossed vegetables in the skillet with a crisp, practiced flick that no newly hired nanny should know. The light from the window gilded his profile, drawing attention to the calm precision of his movements. Naomi forgot she was in a meeting. "Wait, hold on," she said into her microphone, abruptly muting herself and stepping fully into the kitchen doorway. "What are you making?" Alex didn't even flinch at her sudden appearance. "You and Mia haven't eaten since late morning," he said smoothly. "I put together something simple: pan-seared salmon, mango avocado salad, and veggie pasta with garlic cream." Naomi stared as though he'd just pulled a lobster soufflé out of thin air. "Simple," she echoed, crossing her arms. "Most nannies barely manage frozen nuggets." Alex tilted his head, the corner of his mouth curving. "Well, I like when the people I care for have a good experience. People I care for." The words sank deeper than she wanted them to. Heat flushed her cheeks. She hated that he noticed, because the way he looked at her in that moment, steady, attentive, undeniably gentle, made her heart beat out of rhythm. Naomi retreated before she could embarrass herself, but trouble followed her anyway. A few minutes later, the kitchen light flickered, buzzing like it was considering a dramatic exit. Before she could even call the building superintendent, Alex was already reaching for a step stool. "It's just the wiring," he said, removing the cover with deft fingers. "I'll fix it." Naomi blinked, startled. "Did you study electrical work?" "Not quite," he said, replacing the bulb with quick efficiency. "I just prefer things done correctly." Correctly meant with the same meticulous care he applied to million-dollar real estate renovations. But Naomi didn't know that. What she did know was that this man was becoming more confusing by the hour, and then he confused her even more. Mia dragged her tiny plastic piano into the hallway and began slamming the keys like she was interrogating them. Naomi braced for Alex's panic, but he simply knelt beside the instrument, placed his fingers gently on the toy keys, and whispered, Mind if I try? The first notes he played were soft jazz smooth, warm, unexpectedly soulful. A melody that absolutely should not have been possible on a $30 children's keyboard. Mia froze, wide-eyed. Slowly, she sank to the floor, mesmerized. Naomi stopped at the corner of the doorway, one hand against the frame, breath slowing in her chest as she listened. The living room filled with sound that didn't belong in her little townhouse. It belonged in a hotel lounge at midnight, with city lights shimmering through the windows and glasses clinking softly. Who are you? She wondered silently, because everything about him contradicted the idea of an ordinary employee. And then there was the way he looked at her, after Mia had finally gone to bed and the house quieted. Naomi collapsed onto the couch with a cup of tea. Exhaustion pulled at her bones. She hadn't had a calm evening in months. Alex approached with a blanket draped over his arm. Here, he murmured, gently placing it across her legs. You're cold. Naomi stiffened. You? Noticed that Alex met her eyes. Voice low. I notice everything about you. The cup trembled slightly in her hand. It was the kind of sentence no employer should hear from her nanny. Too intimate, too perceptive, too dangerous. And yet, she didn't tell him to stop, didn't ask him to step back. She simply sat there, pulse fluttering uncomfortably fast, unable to look away. When he finally walked back into the hallway, Naomi exhaled shakily, unsure when she'd stopped breathing. Something was happening, something she didn't trust, something she didn't want to want. And yet, her whole body felt alive for the first time in months. That scared her more than anything, because as the day unfolded, she realized every tiny detail added up to one undeniable truth. Alex Harris was not normal. He was perfect effortlessly, impossibly perfect. A man who moved like someone who had always been in control. A man who cooked like a chef, cleaned like a butler, fixed wiring like a contractor, and played piano like he was born to do it. A man whose gaze felt too knowing, too warm, too careful, too much. Naomi opened her phone that night, fingers hovering above her notes app. She typed, "Investigate Alex Harris's background." She stared at the words for a long moment, heart thudding with an emotion she refused to name. Then she held down the delete button until the line vanished. She deleted it, not because she didn't want answers. She deleted it because she was terrified she might find the kind of truth that could break her heart. Or worse, the kind of truth that could make her fall for him harder. And the most frightening part, a whisper deep inside her already had. By 8 in the evening, Naomi expected the man to be gone. Every nanny before him had fled the house long before sunset, usually in tears, occasionally muttering prayers, and once after leaving a resignation note written entirely in emojis. But Alex was still there, still calm, still impossibly composed. He was kneeling beside Mia's bed, smoothing her blanket with gentle hands, whispering goodnight. Naomi lingered at the doorway, watching a scene she had never seen inside her own home, her daughter trusting someone, and not just trusting, leaning toward him as though she had known him for years. When Alex rose to leave the room, Mia suddenly caught his hand, her fingers tiny against his much larger ones. "Can you stay here forever?" she mumbled, blinking sleepily. Naomi's heart lurched painfully. Mia had never gripped any man like that, not since the tiny handful of moments she'd spent curled against her father's chest before tragedy stole him away. That wound still lived quietly in the corners of their house, in pictures Naomi hadn't removed, and toys she hadn't had the heart to donate. Alex crouched again, his voice a low warmth. "I can stay if your mom wants me to." Mia turned to Naomi instantly, as if the entire universe hinged on her answer. "Mom, you want that, right?" Heat shot to Naomi's cheeks. "Mia, sleep." The door clicked shut, and Naomi pressed her back to it, mortified and strangely breathless. "Don't mind her," she said quickly, unable to meet Alex's eyes. "She just says things." Alex's lips curved in a soft, devastating smile. "I don't think she says things carelessly." Naomi's breath caught. Her entire body reacted as if those words had touched bare skin. She turned abruptly toward the dining table, clearing dishes she wasn't truly seeing. Anything to break the spell he seemed to cast without even trying. It worked for about 3 seconds. Then Alex stepped beside her and gently took the pan from her hand. "I'll do it," he said. Voice low enough it vibrated more than it spoke. "You've done enough today." Naomi froze. No one said that to her. Not her boss. Not her colleagues. Not even her own family. She didn't know how to respond, because the simple tenderness of his words wrapped around the ache she carried behind her ribs. She tried to shrug it off. "It's fine. I can handle. I know," he murmured. "You always handle everything, even when you're exhausted." She looked up sharply, startled by how easily he pierced through her defenses. His eyes didn't pity. They simply saw. Naomi hated how much that mattered. She moved to the sink to wash a plate, fighting to regain control. But the truth landed inside her chest, with quiet. Unwelcome clarity. No one had looked at her that way in years. No one had bothered to notice when she was tired, or overwhelmed, or drowning beneath responsibilities she hid with forced strength. But Alex, this stranger, noticed instinctively. Too instinctively. "You work almost non-stop," he said behind her, as though reading the thoughts she hadn't dared articulate. Naomi set the plate down carefully. "I'm a single mom. I don't get breaks. I don't get sick days. I don't get to fall apart. And you?" he asked softly. "Do you ever get anything for yourself?" She laughed, but it came out brittle. "I have 7 ongoing projects, an impossible boss, co-workers who would sell their souls to make me look incompetent, and a child who redefines chaos. The last time I slept 8 hours, I was probably 26. Silence stretched between them, a silence filled with empathy instead of judgment. When Alex finally spoke, his voice was gentle. "You don't deserve to shoulder everything alone." Naomi's fingers tightened around the edge of the sink. Those words, spoken so simply, tore through her armor like nothing else. She blinked hard, suddenly terrified that if she stayed still, she might inconveniently fall apart right in front of him. So she chose deflection instead. "You know," she said shakily, "for a nanny, you talk like a therapist." Alex gave a quiet laugh. "I did take a few courses once, out of curiosity. In reality, he'd studied psychology at Yale, but he let her assume whatever made sense." Naomi gave him a searching look. suspicion flickering across her face. You make it very hard to categorize you. Good. No. Not good, she whispered. You make me feel seen. His expression gentled. No one sees you. She swallowed. Not really. Then they're not looking, he said quietly. She turned away too quickly, unsettled by how intimate the conversation felt. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the air too warm, her heartbeat too loud. She wiped the counter to ground herself, but her hand slipped slightly from the cloth and brushed his fingers. It was barely a touch, a single, fleeting stroke. But it stopped them both. Naomi pulled back sharply, but the jolt she felt lingered in her chest. Alex's gaze dropped to her hand, then rose slowly up to her eyes. The moment stretched delicate, electric, breathless like the air before a storm. They stood so close, she could feel the warmth of him, hear the subtle shift of his breath through the quiet kitchen. A single step, a single decision, would cross a line they couldn't uncross. Alex lowered his voice to a near whisper. If I'm ever too close, tell me. Naomi's pulse thrummed violently. You're not too close. The smile that touched his lips was slow, devastating, and deeply aware. Naomi had to look away again, this time not out of discomfort, but out of fear. Fear that if she looked too long, she might do something reckless. When she walked to the kettle to brew tea, she sensed him follow from a respectful distance, close enough to be present, far enough not to push. That exact distance felt like its own kind of intimacy. As she poured boiling water into the cup, her hands trembled, not just from fatigue, but from the emotional weight of the day, the unexpected comfort, the dangerous warmth blooming inside her. Alex noticed. Of course he noticed. He stepped forward and lightly touched her wrist, steadying her without taking control. Naomi. Her name sounded different in his voice, gentler, deeper, almost reverent. She looked up slowly. His expression held no demand, no expectation, only a rare sincerity that undid something tightly knotted inside her. You don't have to do everything alone anymore, he said softly. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not as long as you want me here. She swallowed hard. You're just a nanny. You shouldn't. He tilted his head slightly, eyes locked with hers. Do you really believe that? She didn't. But admitting that aloud felt like stepping off a cliff. She clutched the cup between her hands to disguise the tremor in her fingers. But she couldn't disguise the truth from herself anymore. She was drawn to him powerfully, undeniably, terrifyingly. And the most dangerous part was how safe she felt around him. Safe in a way that felt like surrender. When Alex finally left for the night, Naomi walked him to the door, her movements slow, heavy with everything left unsaid. The moment he stepped outside, she closed the door and leaned her forehead against it, pressing a hand to her chest. Her heart thudded painfully. I'm falling for him, she realized, breath trembling. Or maybe I'm falling for the way he makes me feel. Protected. Down on the sidewalk. Alex paused beside the black car the agency sent. He looked up at her darkened window, an unguarded, quiet smile softening his face. He'd felt it too. That subtle opening in her defenses. That small, precious shift. Day 1. He murmured to himself, and you've already let me in. And the night swallowed his voice like a promise. Naomi hadn't expected to allow Alex back into her home the next day. Logic warned her not to. Experience warned her not to. Every defense she'd built over 7 years screamed that letting a man cross her threshold twice was already too much risk. But when she woke in the morning, bleary-eyed and craving just one moment of ease, it wasn't logic that governed her. It was curiosity. Not the shallow kind, but the kind that clung to her chest all night while she tossed and turned, replaying the way Alex spoke, the way he listened, the way he understood things she'd never voiced aloud. She wanted to know who he really was. Not the nanny, not the stranger, not the mystery wrapped in flawless gentleness. She wanted the truth, and she wasn't ready for it. At 8 sharp, she opened the door and nearly lost her breath. Alex stood framed by the morning light, too poised for someone in uniform, holding a box of donuts in one hand and a small bouquet, simple, elegant, in the other. Good morning, Ms. Carter, he said with a calm warmth that brushed across her skin like a caress. Naomi crossed her arms, trying to armor herself. You think bringing that is going to make me go easier on you? His smile was subtle, controlled, almost intimate. No, I just wanted your morning to start well. The honesty in that simple sentence hit harder than it should have. Naomi's heart stuttered once, sharply before she stepped aside to let him in. By the time Mia was off to school, Naomi's emotions were already in a tangle she couldn't decipher. She stood by the door, slipping into her coat, fingers clumsy with the zipper, mind pulled thin between deadlines and exhaustion. When she fumbled her keys, Alex moved closer, not intruding, but near enough that she felt the awareness rise in her like a tide. Rough night, he asked, his voice gentle. Naomi forced a brittle smile. I slept a few hours. His gaze didn't waver. Because of work, she hesitated. Because of everything. He studied her. The assessment soft but precise, like he saw through the layers she hid beneath. Then, in a tone so quiet, it startled her, he asked, was it also because of me? She stiffened. Her breath hitched. You're imagining things, she muttered, brushing past him. But she didn't answer the question, and that was an answer in itself. That evening, when Naomi returned from a brutal day at the office, something inside her exhaled the moment she opened the door. The house smelled like garlic and basil, warm and comforting. She spotted Alex in the kitchen stirring a simmering sauce, sleeves rolled, jaw set in concentration. The sight unraveled the last thread of tension, holding her spine rigid. You look like you fought a war, he said softly, offering her a cup of hot tea. She let out a small, humorless laugh and sank into a chair. It felt like one. But I don't have the luxury of quitting. He took the seat across from her, forearms resting loosely on the table, attention fixed entirely on her, like she was the only person in the world. Why, he asked quietly. It wasn't nosy, just sincere. Naomi looked down at her hands. Silence stretched between them until it felt like the only choice was the truth. When I was 5 months pregnant, she whispered. Mia's father left. Alex's expression didn't shift into pity. It softened into something deeper, something that made her chest ache. I had no savings. She continued. No support. I took every job I could find. I worked through contractions. I worked when I was bleeding. I worked when I was crying in bathroom stalls. I didn't have the option to fall apart. Her voice cracked. She hated that it cracked. Alex's hands curled slowly on the table, as if resisting the instinct to reach for her. "You've carried everything alone," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a truth she'd never spoken aloud. Naomi tried to deflect, swallowing the rawness. "I've managed. You've survived," he corrected softly. "That's not the same." Naomi looked away, throat tight. "I don't rely on people. It's safer that way." Alex paused, his voice low and steady. "Maybe you've been alone long enough." The words hit her like a gentle blow, unexpected, impossibly tender. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. And then, without warning, something shifted in him. A tension, a hesitation. He leaned back slightly, as if weighing the weight of his next words. "Naomi," he said slowly. "There's something I should tell you about who I really—" The sentence shattered as Mia burst into the kitchen, math homework in hand, shouting his name like he was her personal superhero. The moment dissolved instantly. Naomi exhaled in relief. Alex exhaled in disappointment. Neither admitted to the other which emotion was stronger. While he helped Mia with equations on the living room floor, Alex's phone buzzed repeatedly. He glanced at the screen once, jaw tightening. Naomi didn't notice, but had she looked, she would have seen a string of urgent messages. "Alexander, the board meeting was moved to tonight. Hale, we need your signature. $800 million are on the line. Where the hell are you? The press is asking questions. The world he'd built the empire. The meetings, the power was calling him back." But he silenced the phone and set it face down. He wasn't leaving. Not yet. He'd never wanted something as much as he wanted to stay in this small Brooklyn townhouse, with this fierce woman and her wild child who had wrapped themselves around his heart faster than he could defend himself. Naomi watched him later that night while he washed dishes, sleeves pushed up, steam curling around his arms. Something unsettling tugged at her, a suspicion but utterly misguided. "Why are you good at everything?" she asked. Alex glanced over his shoulder, eyes warm. "You think so? Don't pretend you don't know," she said, stepping closer. "You cook like a chef. You manage my house like a luxury hotel. You fix wiring like a contractor. You talk like someone who studied psychology." His lips twitched. "People are full of surprises." "What were you before this?" she pressed, studying him. Military Alex nearly choked on the water he was drinking. Or maybe a butler for some billionaire, she guessed. Or, "God, are you running from debt collectors?" "No," he said, laughing under his breath. "Definitely not that." Then what she demanded, stepping even closer. He set the dish aside, wiped his hands, and turned toward her fully. The kitchen suddenly felt too small to contain the tension between them. "I'm not hiding," he said, voice dropping. "I'm not running from anything." He moved closer, slow and deliberate, until she could feel the warmth radiating off him. "I'm here because I'm looking for something I didn't know I needed." She inhaled sharply, retreating one step, not from fear, but from the overwhelming urge to lean into him. "Alex, you don't have to be afraid of me." I'm not afraid of you, she whispered. I'm afraid of this. Her hand hovered between them, trembling faintly. I don't know what I'm feeling. Alex's eyes softened, darkened. Then let me help you feel the right things. She shook her head. You don't understand. I've been broken before. Loving someone cost me everything. Then let me be the man who gives instead of takes, he said, stepping forward, just enough to close the space she'd left behind. Let me be the reason you believe again. Naomi didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't run. I don't know if I'm ready, she whispered. I can wait, he replied. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't seduction. It was a vow that night, when he left her home. Naomi watched him from the window, not out of suspicion, but because she wanted to see him again already. She pressed her hand to her heart and whispered into the empty room. What are you doing to me down on the sidewalk? Alex paused by the car, hand on his chest, as though steadying something fragile and fierce inside him. He looked back toward her window, unseen, and whispered into the night. The day you learn who I am, I only hope you'll still want me here. The truth was coming, and when it did, neither of them would be the same. After Alex left the night before, Naomi slept in a way she hadn't in months. Not deeply, not dreamlessly, but warmly, like someone had draped a blanket over the bruised parts of her heart. She woke with a strange, unwelcome, irresistible thought pulsing in her mind. I want to see him again. She hated that. She also didn't. Because beneath her fear, beneath the instinct to protect herself, something inside her had already begun to soften dangerously, inevitably toward the man who wasn't supposed to matter. At 7:15 the next morning, Naomi opened the door, expecting the usual morning chaos. Instead, she found Alex crouched on the stoop, tying Mia's shoelaces with deliberate patience, while the little girl chattered happily about a class project. Mia already had her backpack on, hair neatly brushed, face glowing with excitement. Naomi blinked twice. You're early. Alex stood, brushing dust from his palms with effortless ease. I didn't want you to be late to work, he said simply, as though stepping seamlessly into her life required no explanation at all. She stared at the two of them, her daughter smiling like sunrise. This man fitting into their morning like he'd always belonged, and her heart dipped, softening against her will. Something about the scene felt right. Too right. And that frightened her more than anything. While she dressed for work, Alex crafted breakfast with the quiet proficiency of someone who had memorized her preferences down to the smallest detail. She emerged to find soft Japanese-style rolled omelets, garlic butter toast, fruit cut into perfect cubes, and most alarming of all, a cup of coffee with precisely the ratio of milk and sugar she liked. She never told him how she took it, but he handed it to her like he'd known for years. Can you read my mind? She asked, trying and failing to sound unimpressed. Alex leaned one hand on the counter, eyes dark and warm. I pay attention. That answer slipped into her chest more sharply than any flirtatious line could have. Attention was a currency she'd long forgotten the value of. The warmth of the morning evaporated the moment she stepped into the office. Her boss summoned her immediately, voice cold. Carter, Your report has errors. If this happens again, I'll remove you from the project." She swallowed hard. She knew she hadn't made mistakes. Someone had tampered with her data. But when she stepped out, she caught co-workers smirking, whispering. A man leaned close enough to make her want to recoil. "Moms are always distracted," he murmured. "Especially single ones." Naomi's jaw tightened until her teeth hurt. She wanted to cry, but she never cried at work, only at home, only where no one could see. When she finally returned home at 7, exhausted, furious, humiliated, Alex was waiting, not lurking, not hovering, simply standing at the kitchen doorway, towel in hand, eyes steady and knowing, not curious, not pitying, just understanding, like he'd read the ache she was hiding beneath her coat. "Rough day?" he asked softly. Naomi didn't trust her voice, so she only nodded. Her lips trembled, despite her best efforts. Alex stepped closer, one hand lifting to her shoulder with a gentleness that nearly broke her. "Come in," he murmured. She followed him into the dining room and stopped dead. Candlelight flickered on the walls. Soft jazz filled the air like a velvet ribbon. The table was set beautifully, immaculately, impossibly like a scene from a restaurant far above her pay grade. Mia sat at her own small table, drawing contentedly, waving a crayon. Uncle Alex said Mommy was sad. "So he made your favorite dinner." Naomi's throat tightened painfully as her eyes landed on the dishes: honey-glazed roasted chicken, tomatoes bursting with color, a bottle of red wine she hadn't had in years, the one she'd tried once at a corporate event long before life had hardened her. She turned to Alex, stunned. "How did you know I liked this?" He stepped closer, voice low. "I notice which things make you smile." Naomi looked away quickly, pulse stumbling, because no one had spoken to her like that for a very long time, maybe ever. Dinner unfolded slowly, gently, like a balm poured over her raw nerves, in the warm glow of candles. Naomi finally confessed the truth of her awful day. "They treat me like I'm a burden," she whispered. "They think a black woman with a child doesn't deserve to rise." Alex's jaw flexed, not with anger at her, but with fury on her behalf. "They have no idea," he said, voice firm, "that the strongest person in that entire building is you." Naomi gave a small, bitter laugh. "Don't flatter me. I'm not flattering you," he said. "I respect you." The word struck her like a lightning bolt, because respect was a luxury she rarely received. After dinner, as Naomi sipped the last of her wine, Mia yawned dramatically and declared with comedic seriousness, "Mommy, are you and Uncle Alex gonna kiss now like on TV?" Naomi nearly choked, sputtering. Alex simply smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that made her pulse jump. "Mia." Naomi gasped. "Who taught you that?" "Television." Mia shrugged, unbothered. People who like each other kiss. Alex stood then, walking to Naomi with deliberate, careful steps. Stopping close enough to bend her breath, he lowered his voice. "I'll wait," he said, "for whenever you're ready." Naomi couldn't breathe for several seconds. She was grateful Mia was too sleepy to notice her mother melting on the spot later. When the house quieted and Mia was tucked into bed, Naomi found herself beside Alex at the sink again, their new ritual, her hand holding a dish towel. His immersed in suds. They worked in silence. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was full of something soft, something humming, something neither of them dared name. Their hands brushed. Naomi didn't pull away this time. Alex stilled, eyes dropping to the contact, then lifting deliberately to hers. If I told you that being here, that this place feels like home. His voice trailed lower, warmer. What would you think? Naomi swallowed. I'd think you're crossing a line. Alex tilted his head. And if I want to? Naomi whispered, barely audible. Alex, I'm only asking, he murmured. But the real question pulsed between them. It said, will you let me? When he finally prepared to leave, Naomi walked him to the door, her fingers curled around the handle to steady herself, as though the air around him destabilized her balance. As he stepped out, he paused, turning back with an intimacy that made her breath catch. Naomi, he said quietly, if tomorrow is as hard as today, I'll still be here. She stared at him, eyes suddenly hot with the threat of tears. Why do you care so much? She whispered. Alex didn't hesitate. Because from the moment I first saw you, I haven't been able to stop. The truth in his voice shattered something inside her. She closed the door slowly, leaned her forehead against it, heart pounding like a trapped bird. I'm falling for him, she whispered into the empty hallway. For the first time, she didn't deny it. But she had no idea that the real storm was coming, the one that would hit the moment she discovered who Alex truly was. 3 days had passed since that candlelit dinner. 3 days that felt unreal, tender, dangerous. Naomi tried to convince herself nothing had changed, but everything had. Her mornings felt warmer, her evenings softer, her heart more reckless. She found herself listening for Alex's footsteps, waiting for his knock, thinking of him during lunch breaks and long subway rides. She hated that feeling, and she wanted it more than breath. Just when their connection reached its most delicate, beautiful threshold, his secret detonated. The morning of the explosion was ordinary in all the wrong ways. Naomi rushed Mia to school, rushed herself onto the train, clutching the cup of coffee Alex had made smooth, sweet, perfect, in the exact way she never admitted she liked. She reached the lobby of her office building and immediately sensed something odd. A cluster of co-workers crowded around the massive lobby screen, whispering excitedly. Naomi didn't care. She wanted to get to her desk, drown herself in spreadsheets, and not think about Alex's hands brushing hers the night before. Then she heard the name. Alexander Hale. 5 days missing, board of directors in meltdown, media going insane. Her heart stuttered. The name meant nothing to her until the screen flickered, and a photo appeared. A photo she knew too well. A face she had touched. A face she had memorized. A face she had started to fall for. Alex. Except not Alex in an apron. Not Alex cooking salmon or tying Mia's shoes or adjusting her blanket. This Alex wore a black tailored suit, a charcoal coat, a watch worth more than her entire annual salary. The headline blazed across the screen like a knife. Alexander Hale, 40 C.O. of Hale Capital, disappears from Wall Street. For 5 days, Naomi froze. The world around her vanished. Her breath vanished. Her bones turned to ice. It couldn't be. No. 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 Her mouth went dry. Her pulse roaring in her ears. One of her co-workers noticed her paling. Carter. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. She had. Naomi stumbled into the restroom, slammed the door, and gripped the sink until her knuckles whitened. In her bag was the note Alex had left her that morning. Dinner tonight. Let me take care of you. The betrayal hit like a punch to the chest. He's a millionaire. She whispered to the mirror. A CEO. A man with a penthouse. And I. Her voice cracked. I'm just a single mom from Brooklyn. She pressed a hand to her mouth, but the tears still came. For the first time in years, she couldn't stop them. She left work early. She didn't trust herself to keep standing. When she walked into her house, Alex was in the kitchen, humming lightly as he prepared dinner. He wore her apron. He looked comfortable, like someone who belonged here. The sound of the door closing made him turn, and his smile evaporated instantly. Naomi, he said, voice threading with concern. She didn't answer. She simply tossed her phone onto the counter. The CNBC screenshot glowed up at him. His photo, his name, his truth. Alexander Hale, she said, her voice breaking. Silence snapped through the room like a blade. He inhaled, slow, controlled, like a man preparing for impact. He untied the apron, set it down carefully. Naomi, let me explain. Explain, she whispered, trembling. You lied to me. He shook his head. No, I didn't get the chance to. You had 5 days, she shouted, voice cracking. 5 days of cooking for my daughter, fixing my lights, talking to me like I was something you actually saw. Tears spilled over. And all that time, you were a CEO, a millionaire, a man who lives in Manhattan's tallest glass tower. Alex took a step toward her, but she recoiled like his presence burned. He stopped immediately. I stayed here because of you, he said softly. Not because of money or status, because I didn't want to leave your world. Don't, she whispered sharply. Don't say things you don't mean. I mean every word. Then why didn't you tell me? Alex exhaled, guilt and longing mixing painfully in his eyes. Because I didn't want you to treat me differently. I didn't want you to look at me like I was some unreachable thing. Naomi gave a broken laugh. Too late for that. Her anger cracked, revealing something raw beneath fear. Do you know what terrifies me most? She whispered. Letting someone into my life, into Mia's life, and then they leave. Alex clenched his jaw. I'm not leaving. You will, she cried. Men like you always do. You have the world at your feet. I have daycare bills and a grocery budget. Her voice shattered. We're not even living in the same universe. He moved again, but she backed away faster. Naomi, he said, voice breaking for the first time. I'm here because you're the first person who ever made me want to stay. The first person I wanted to wake up to. The first. Stop. She sobbed. Stop making this sound romantic when it's all lies. It wasn't a lie. You came into my home pretending to be someone else. I came as myself." He murmured, "I just didn't tell you my title. A title that changes everything." A devastating silence pressed between them. Naomi pointed to the door, her hand shaking. "Get out." Alex froze. "Naomi." "Get out before Mia comes home." Her voice wasn't angry. This time, it was wounded, broken, final. Something inside Alex caved, shattered quietly. He nodded, though it looked like it cost him everything. He grabbed his coat, walked to the doorway like a man carrying a dying truth on his shoulders. Before leaving, he turned back one last time, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't disguise myself to lie to you. I disguised myself because it was the only way I could get close to you without scaring you away." Naomi squeezed her eyes shut as tears streamed down. She couldn't stop them, couldn't breathe around them. Alex stepped out and closed the door. Naomi crumpled to the floor, knees to her chest, sobbing in a way she hadn't cried since the day Mia's father disappeared. Later that night, she stared at her phone for what felt like hours. She typed, "Don't come anymore," deleted it, typed again, deleted it harder. Finally, she tossed the phone aside, turned off the lights, and crawled into bed with Mia, clutching her daughter against her chest like a lifeline. She pretended she was fine. She wasn't. She pretended she could forget him. She couldn't. Somewhere across the city, Alex stood alone in the glass silence of his penthouse, the skyline glittering beneath him like a world he no longer fit into. His phone vibrated endlessly, his board, his executives, the press. "Alexander, you're needed. Where are you? Is this about a woman the media is circling?" He turned the phone face down and pressed his palms to his eyes. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. His chest felt hollow, wrong, aching. He didn't care about the board. He didn't care about the empire he'd built. The truth was simple and devastating. He'd hurt the one woman he'd sworn to protect. "I made her afraid." He whispered into the empty penthouse. "I have to fix this." He didn't know how yet. He didn't know when. But he knew one thing with absolute, painful clarity. He would spend everything he had: money, power, reputation, time, if it meant earning one more chance to stand at Naomi Carter's door. Because losing her felt like losing the only real thing he'd ever found. Naomi tried to return to her old life after slamming her door in Alex's face, but nothing felt familiar anymore. Not the silence, not the routine, not even the air in her own home. Everything felt emptier, colder, like someone had carved out the center and left only the shell. She kept moving because that was all she'd learned to do: wake up, work, pick up Mia, cook, clean, sleep. But each action felt like a pantomime copied from another woman in another life. She missed him, even when she refused to say his name. She missed him with a ferocity that frightened her. She missed the sound of him humming while he cooked. She missed the clumsy way he tied the apron. She missed how he always handed her coffee before she asked. She missed the way he looked at her, like she was a universe he was learning to orbit. And worst of all, she missed the warmth he brought into the house, the warmth she pretended she didn't need. One evening, while picking up toys scattered across the living room floor, she found it a drawing Mia had made for Alex, a stick-figure superhero with a cape and messy hair. Underneath, written in crooked marker letters, "Uncle Alex is my hero." Naomi pressed the paper to her chest, feeling it tear something inside her. Mom Mia's small voice carried from the hallway. Naomi quickly wiped her eyes, but Mia had already seen. "Where's Uncle Alex? Why isn't he coming anymore?" Naomi dropped to her knees and hugged her daughter tightly. He's not coming back," she whispered, her voice cracking. Mia clung to her. "But I miss him." Naomi's tears spilled freely then. "Me too." The house that once felt too small now felt like a cavern, echoing, hollow, haunted by what they'd lost. Across the city, in a penthouse large enough to hold the emptiness of 10 lifetimes, Alex wasn't faring better. He sat on the floor by the window, hair disheveled, shirt rumpled, eyes hollow. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't answered a single call from the board. His assistant had left 10 voicemails. The press was circling like sharks. His name was trending worldwide. But none of that mattered. Nothing mattered except the memory of Naomi's voice breaking as she screamed at him to get out. He kept replaying every mistake, every hesitation, every moment he should have told her the truth sooner. "I hurt her." He whispered into the empty room. "I hurt the only person I never wanted to hurt." Snow began to fall outside, drifting slowly at first, then faster. The forecast warned of an incoming blizzard, a deadly one. Alex didn't care. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I have to fix this. Somehow. By nightfall." New York was swallowed by white. Winds slashed down the streets, rattling windows and freezing everything they touched. Naomi and Mia were trapped inside. Electricity flickering restlessly. The heating system sputtered, then died completely, plunging the apartment into a cold so sharp it stung. Naomi wrapped Mia in blankets, holding her close. "It'll be okay," she said softly, though she wasn't sure she believed it. Mia trembled and whispered the words that pierced Naomi's heart. "I wish Uncle Alex was here." Naomi bowed her head, fighting tears. "Me too, baby." But she had chosen this. She had sent him away. And now they were alone again, just as she'd always feared. Just as she'd always survived. Until now. When the cold felt too bitter, too final, too much. Then 3 loud pounding knocks shattered the silence. Naomi froze. The wind howled behind the door as she rushed to open it. A violent gust of snow blew inside. And through the storm, through the blur of white and darkness, stood Alex, breathless, shivering. His hair and coat coated in frost. His lips were blue. His eyes were raw. "Naomi," he managed, voice hoarse. She stared at him, unable to breathe. "Alex, how did you even—" "There's a storm." He staggered inside, nearly collapsing against the doorway. "I made a promise," he rasped, "that if you ever needed me, I'd come." He swallowed hard, trembling violently. "And tonight, even though you didn't call, I knew you did." Mia shot out from the blankets, running across the room. Uncle Alex. Alex steadied himself just long enough to catch her in an embrace, his frozen hands cradling her small back. He pressed his cheek to her hair and exhaled shakily. "Hey, sweetheart." When Naomi touched his jacket, she panicked. He was ice cold. "Alex, you're freezing. You need to sit." But he shook his head, eyes dark with determination. "Where's the heater?" Blinked. "What? The heater? Show me." She guided him to the broken unit. He knelt despite his shaking, pried open the panel, and worked with numb fingers. A few minutes later, sparks clicked. The system hummed. Warmth surged into the room. Naomi covered her mouth, tears blurring her vision. Why? Why would you come in a storm like this? Why risk? Alex stood and turned to her, drenched, shivering, but eyes burning with truth. "Because I love you." Naomi froze. The words didn't thunder. They landed softly, like snow, but they shook her entire world. Alex stepped closer, his voice raw. "Not because you're a single mother, not because you're strong, not because you're resilient." His hand lifted to her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear. "I love you." Naomi Carter, the woman who keeps fighting even when the world tries to break her. She blinked rapidly, stunned. He continued, breathing unevenly. "I've had money, power, everything men are supposed to want, and none of it ever felt like home." His voice cracked. "Until I stepped into your kitchen." Naomi choked on a sob. He took her hands, warming them between his. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you who I was. It wasn't because I thought less of you. It's because I thought, if you knew the truth, you'd push me away." Naomi lowered her gaze. "I did push you away, because you were afraid." "Yeah," he whispered, "not because you didn't feel something." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I was scared you'd see me as not enough." Alex cupped her face with trembling hands. "You are more than enough. You're everything I never knew I needed." Naomi's walls, those walls she'd built with grief and fear and years of abandonment, finally cracked. She stepped closer, clutching his coat. "Don't leave again," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't disappear. Don't make me fall for you and then fight myself to forget you." Alex's breath trembled. "I'm not going anywhere." She looked up at him, studying the sincerity in his eyes. "Stay with us," she whispered. Alex smiled soft, relieved, overflowing with warmth. "Forever." He leaned in. She closed her eyes. Their lips met gentle at first, a trembling apology, then deeper, fuller. A promise sealed in warmth while snow howled outside. They broke apart only when a tiny voice squealed from the sofa. Naomi laughed through tears, burying her face in Alex's shoulder as Mia groaned dramatically. Alex scooped Mia up and kissed her forehead. "I won't let you be cold again," he whispered to her. Mia blinked. "So, are you going to be my dad now?" The question shattered the last of Naomi's composure. She looked at Alex, scared and hopeful. Alex knelt and touched Mia's hair, gently. If you want me to be. Mia threw her arms around him. Yes. Later, as they curled near the now blazing heater, Alex played with Mia on the rug, while Naomi watched from the couch, watched the man who had walked through a blizzard for them, who had chosen them over the world he once ruled. For the first time in 7 long years, her heart didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a home. Alex extended his hand toward her. Naomi, he said softly, come here. With me. She joined them, letting him pull both her and Mia into his arms. Outside, the storm raged, but inside there was warmth, safety, love, a family being written in real time. Alex moved to Brooklyn permanently, turning his penthouse into an office, choosing a small home over luxury because it held the 2 people who mattered. He still ran Hale Capital, but every evening, he cooked dinner, helped Mia with homework, and kissed Naomi slow and soft before bed. Naomi earned a promotion, a fair one, thanks to her talent, though Alex stood behind her silently the entire way. They built a life not defined by wealth or status, but by quiet mornings, shared laughter, and a warmth that came from healing together. And every night, as Alex wrapped his arms around Naomi and she rested against him, she whispered the truth she once feared to speak. You're home. And he always answered, with you. I finally am.